He cares.
The story unfolds in 1956 Chicago, where snow blankets the streets and cold winds sweep through the city's darker corners. Inside a modest storefront marked with elegant lettering reading, L. Burling Bespoke, an elderly Englishman works with quiet precision. This is Leonard Burling, though to call him simply a tailor would miss the point entirely. Leonard insists on the proper title, cutter.
I'm not a tailor. I'm a cutter.
Distinction that speaks to years of rigorous training on London's famed Savile Row. He moves through his workspace with the practiced grace of someone who has devoted his entire existence to a single craft. The shop itself feels frozen in time. Warm lighting casts amber shadows across shelves lined with bolts of fine fabric, Italian wools, English tweeds, silks imported from distant lands. Every surface is meticulously organized. Scissors hang precisely where they belong. Thread spools arranged by shade. Measurement tapes coiled with care. Leonard explains in careful detail how creating a proper suit requires 38 separate pieces of fabric and follows 228 distinct steps. Each step demands attention. Each measurement matters. A fraction of an inch separates excellence from mediocrity. Working alongside Leonard is Mabel Shawn, a young woman whose restless energy contrasts sharply with his measured calm. Mabel handles the shop's front desk, greets customers, manages appointments, but her mind wanders constantly to places far beyond Chicago's cold streets. She collects snow globes featuring famous landmarks: Paris, Barcelona, London, Madrid. Each glass sphere represents a dream, a future escape from the neighborhood where she grew up surrounded by violence and limited choices. Leonard watches her with quiet affection, seeing in Mabel something like a daughter, though she resists this connection. She makes clear she has no intention of learning his craft or inheriting his trade. Her ambitions reach further than fabric and thread. The shop serves another purpose beyond tailoring. Leonard's customers include Chicago's wealthiest families, but also its most dangerous. The Boyle crime family controls this territory, and they use Leonard's establishment as a convenient drop point for packages and messages. A small mailbox sits near the entrance, ostensibly for customer notes, but frequently filled with envelopes containing cash, instructions, coded communications. Leonard tolerates this arrangement with apparent indifference. He acknowledges their presence with polite nods, takes their measurements when they commission suits, but shows no visible interest in their criminal enterprises. To them, he is simply English.
Knock, knock. How's business, English?
The quiet foreign tailor who minds his own business. Roy Boyle himself was Leonard's very first customer when the shop opened years ago. Roy leads the Irish mob with calculated brutality, a man who understands that power flows from both fear and respect. He appreciates fine clothing, viewing it as armor, a way to project authority before a single word is spoken. His organization operates from the shadows, trafficking drugs, extorting businesses, and eliminating rivals. Among his most frequent visitors to the shop are his son Richie and his chief enforcer, Francis. Richie Boyle carries himself with the entitled swagger of someone born into power but never truly tested by it. He is Roy's only child, pampered, impatient, hungry for his father's approval, yet perpetually falling short of expectations. Francis, by contrast, came from nothing. Roy pulled him from the streets years ago after Francis saved his life during a gang dispute. Since then, Francis has proven himself ruthless, efficient, loyal. This creates tension. Richie resents Francis for possessing the one thing Richie desperately wants: Roy's trust and respect. Francis views Richie as weak, a spoiled heir who has never earned his position. The two men circle each other like wolves, allies by necessity, enemies beneath the surface. Mabel has become romantically entangled with Richie, though she hides this involvement from Leonard. She knows exactly how dangerous the Boyles are. She has spent her entire life surrounded by men like them, watched them destroy everything they touch. But Mabel also understands how to survive in their world. She once explained her philosophy to Leonard. When dealing with predators, you look them straight in the eye and pretend you are one of them. Leonard suspects the relationship anyway. He notices small things, the way Richie lingers when he visits, how Mabel's voice shifts when she speaks to him, subtle glances exchanged when they think no one is watching. Leonard warns her gently to be careful, but Mabel brushes off his concerns with practiced confidence. One evening after closing, Leonard remains behind working on a suit commissioned by an important client. The fabric is expensive, the measurements precise, the stitching demanding his full concentration. He loses track of time and eventually dozes at his work table, exhausted. The sound of the front door opening jerks him awake. Voices drift from the showroom. Mabel and Richie have entered the shop together, seeking privacy away from prying eyes. Leonard remains still in the back room, accidentally eavesdropping on their conversation. Richie vents his frustrations about Francis, explaining how his father trusts the outsider more than his own blood. He believes Francis is undermining him, poisoning Roy against him. Richie describes how the Boyle organization has been receiving mysterious letters signed by an entity called the Outfit, supposedly a vast criminal syndicate founded decades ago by Al Capone himself. These communications have made everyone paranoid. Francis has become convinced someone within the organization is betraying them, feeding information to their rivals, the LaFontaine family. Richie dismisses Francis's suspicions as paranoid manipulation designed to make Roy doubt his own son. As they talk, Leonard accidentally knocks over a tool. The sudden noise alerts the couple to his presence. Mabel quickly ushers Richie out before Leonard can emerge from the back room, preserving the illusion that she was alone. Days pass with their usual rhythm until everything changes one cold night. The shop has closed. Leonard is organizing fabric when Francis bursts through the door, supporting a bleeding, half-conscious Richie. Francis checks frantically to ensure they are alone before dragging Richie into the back room and laying him on Leonard's work table. Richie has been shot in the stomach during a violent confrontation with LaFontaine's men. Blood soaks through his shirt, spreading across the expensive fabric Leonard had been working on earlier. Francis barks orders at Leonard while searching desperately for supplies. He explains they cannot take Richie to a hospital. Too many questions, too much risk of police involvement. He demands Leonard stitch the wound closed, despite Leonard's protests that he is a tailor, not a surgeon. Francis grows increasingly agitated, revealing they were ambushed while retrieving an important package, a briefcase containing an audio cassette. This tape supposedly holds FBI wiretap recordings that will expose the traitor within the Boyle family. Francis warns Leonard that multiple organizations are hunting for this tape. If it falls into the wrong hands, everyone connected to the Boyles will be destroyed. Leonard reluctantly agrees to help, drawing on distant memories from his past, experiences he does not fully explain. He prepares needle and thread. The procedure is agonizing. Richie screams and thrashes until he loses consciousness from blood loss and shock. Leonard's hands remain steady despite the grotesque nature of the task. He closes the wound with careful stitches, stopping the bleeding and giving Richie a chance at survival. Once Richie is stabilized, Francis seals the cassette tape inside the briefcase and prepares to leave. He orders Leonard to watch over Richie until he returns. Leonard refuses adamantly, insisting he wants no part of their violence, no involvement in their criminal affairs. Francis's response is cold and direct. Leonard became involved the moment Richie's blood stained his floor. There is no walking away now. Francis explains he must find a tape player immediately. The recording will identify the traitor, and time is running out. He warns Leonard that if anything happens to that tape, Leonard will face consequences worse than death. After Francis departs, Leonard begins cleaning blood from the stained suit fabric, methodically replacing the ruined material with fresh cloth. His movements are mechanical, almost meditative, as though the familiar ritual can restore order to chaos. Richie eventually regains consciousness, weak and disoriented. He asks for water. Leonard brings it to him without comment. Richie thanks him for saving his life, his voice hoarse with pain and genuine gratitude. They begin talking to pass the tense hours while waiting for Francis to return. During their conversation, Leonard asks carefully constructed questions. He inquires about Richie's relationship with his father, about Francis's role in the organization, and about who might want to betray the Boyles. Richie speaks freely, perhaps too freely, his defenses lowered by blood loss and medication. He admits he has always resented Francis for stealing his father's affection. He explains how Roy taught him to tie a necktie when he was only 4 years old, emphasizing that appearance and presentation form the foundation of respect. Richie desperately wants to prove himself worthy of the Boyle legacy, but opportunities keep slipping through his fingers while Francis succeeds at every turn. Leonard listens attentively, his expression neutral, offering occasional observations that subtly guide the conversation. At one point, Leonard calmly states that he himself could be the traitor they are searching for. Richie laughs at the suggestion, assuming it is a joke. Why would a simple tailor betray a crime family? What would he possibly gain? Leonard corrects him gently, reminding Richie once again that he is not a tailor, but a cutter, someone who spent years mastering an ancient craft at England's most prestigious fashion houses. Leonard explains he came to Chicago after World War II, when London fell into poverty and cheap manufactured clothing like blue jeans began replacing bespoke tailoring. He insists his work is timeless, not subject to passing trends. The conversation drifts to Francis. Leonard plants seeds of doubt, suggesting that Francis's zealous hunt for the traitor might indicate Francis himself is guilty. After all, who better to deflect suspicion than the person leading the investigation? Richie considers this possibility, his paranoia growing. Leonard watches carefully, measuring the effect of his words like a craftsman measuring fabric. When Francis finally returns carrying a portable tape player, Leonard has already begun weaving an invisible web of mistrust between the two men. Before Francis can speak with Richie, Leonard pulls him aside privately and whispers that Richie has been acting strangely, accusing Francis of betrayal, even opening the briefcase to tamper with the tape. None of this is true, but Leonard delivers the lie with perfect conviction. Francis's face darkens with suspicion. Meanwhile, influenced by Leonard's earlier insinuations, Richie immediately questions why Francis escaped their ambush unharmed while Richie took a bullet. He demands answers. Francis explains he was simply lucky, managed to fight his way clear, while Richie hesitated. But Richie is no longer convinced. The tension escalates rapidly. Richie insists they wait for Roy before listening to the tape. Francis argues they need to hear it immediately to identify the traitor before more damage occurs. Their argument grows heated, voices rising, accusations flying. In the chaos, they discover the briefcase is empty. Someone has taken the tape. Richie draws his pistol and aims it at Francis, certain now that Francis is the betrayer. Francis returns fire with cold logic, pointing out that Richie has always been weak, always been a liability, always needed others to clean up his mistakes. Richie's attention wavers for just a moment. Francis does not hesitate. He shoots Richie in the throat. Richie collapses, choking on his own blood, dying within seconds. Francis shoots him again to be certain.
You didn't die because you're dumb or because you're slow. It was because you're weak.
Leonard stands frozen in genuine shock. Francis demands to know where the tape is hidden. Leonard insists he has no idea. Francis frantically searches for it, tearing through the shop but finds nothing. Moments later, headlights appear outside. Roy Boyle has arrived with his bodyguard Monk. Francis panics, realizing he must hide Richie's body and clean the blood before Roy enters. He begs Leonard to help delay Roy at the door while he works. Leonard agrees with surprising calm. Roy greets Leonard warmly when he enters, thanking him for sheltering his son and remaining loyal to the family during dangerous times. By the time Roy reaches the back room, Francis has managed to remove most of the visible blood and has invented a story. When Roy asks where Richie is, Francis explains that Richie took the tape and left to find his father, refusing to wait despite Francis's protests. Roy immediately grows suspicious. He makes phone calls trying to locate Richie, but receives no information. He orders Francis to go search for him. Francis hesitates, terrified of leaving Roy alone in the shop where Richie's corpse is hidden nearby, but eventually obeys. While waiting, Roy examines the shop more closely. His eyes settle on Leonard's tools, the heavy shears, the measuring instruments. Roy pulls out his own weapon, a pistol, and compares it to Leonard's scissors. He suggests they are both craftsmen in their own way, using their tools to shape the world around them. Roy explains that the Boyle family has been offered membership in the Outfit, the legendary criminal syndicate that connects every major gang across America and Europe. This alliance would provide protection, resources, and unlimited opportunity, but it also comes with scrutiny. The Outfit provided the wiretap recording to help Roy eliminate the traitor before bringing the Boyles into the fold. Leonard appears confused by Roy's sudden openness, asking why Roy is sharing such sensitive information with someone he has always kept at arm's length. Roy's expression hardens. He reveals he already knows Richie never left the shop. Richie's winter coat still hangs in the back room. His son would never venture into December cold without it. Roy demands the truth. He signals to Monk, who draws his weapon and points it at Leonard. Before Leonard can respond, Francis returns, holding Mabel at gunpoint. He claims he found her at her apartment and noticed blood on her carpet, suggesting Richie visited her after being wounded. Roy begins interrogating Mabel aggressively. Francis accuses her of being the traitor, arguing that her relationship with Richie gave her access to sensitive information. Leonard defends her, insisting he has known Mabel for years and she is incapable of betrayal. Francis ignores him and strikes Mabel repeatedly, demanding answers. Leonard physically intervenes, trying to pull Francis away. Roy and his men drag Mabel into another room to continue the interrogation. Leonard, overwhelmed by everything he has been holding inside, tells Roy he needs to step outside for air. Francis blocks the door. Roy declares no one leaves until Richie is found. Leonard's composure finally cracks. He tells Roy he understands exactly how he feels, the desperation of searching for someone precious while watching the world collapse around you. Then Leonard admits the truth behind why he came to Chicago. He reveals he once had a wife and daughter. They died when his shop in London burned down, trapped inside while flames consumed everything he loved. Because of that loss, he now views Mabel as his own child. He cannot stand by and watch her be destroyed. The telephone rings. Leonard answers it and tells Roy the call is from Richie. According to Leonard, Richie says he is hiding from LaFontaine's men at a specific street address and needs to be picked up immediately. Roy decides to go himself with his crew. Francis volunteers to stay behind, claiming he will watch Leonard and Mabel in case they attempt anything. Roy agrees and departs with Monk, leaving Francis alone with his prisoners. Once Roy is gone, Leonard reveals what he has done. The phone call was a fabrication. Leonard deliberately sent Roy into an ambush. LaFontaine's men will be waiting at that location to kill everyone who arrives. Francis is stunned. Leonard then drops an even more devastating revelation. Mabel has been the traitor all along. Her relationship with Richie gave her constant access to insider information about Boyle operations. She sold this intelligence to the LaFontaine family in exchange for money to fund her dreams of escaping Chicago. When she realized the Boyles would eventually discover her betrayal, Mabel made a deal with the FBI, agreeing to help them plant surveillance equipment in exchange for protection once the entire organization was arrested. Leonard admits he has known about Mabel's activities from the beginning and chose to protect her rather than expose her. Now he offers Francis a choice. Mabel can contact LaFontaine and tell them Francis's location. LaFontaine will come to eliminate him, believing Francis is alone and vulnerable. Alternatively, Roy will return, discover Richie's body, and kill everyone involved. Cornered, Francis reluctantly agrees to the plan. Mabel makes the call and arranges a meeting, offering to sell the tape to LaFontaine in exchange for cash. When LaFontaine arrives with armed men, Francis prepares to ambush them from hiding. Leonard and Mabel are supposed to signal him once the money is handed over, allowing Francis to emerge and kill everyone. But Leonard and Mabel betray Francis as well. They inform LaFontaine where Francis is hiding. When Francis jumps out with his weapon raised, he discovers Leonard has secretly emptied his gun earlier.
Earlier this evening, I removed all the bullets.
LaFontaine's men shoot Francis multiple times. He collapses, mortally wounded, but still alive. After LaFontaine departs with the fake tape, Leonard explains everything to Mabel. He confesses that he recorded the original tape himself, using his own voice to create false communications from the outfit. The Boyles never had any connection to that legendary syndicate. Leonard invented it all to manipulate them. The real recording device has been running the entire night, capturing every conversation, every confession, every crime committed in his shop. This evidence will be enough to dismantle both the Boyle and LaFontaine organizations once Mabel delivers it to her FBI contact. Leonard urges Mabel to take the money LaFontaine paid her and leave Chicago immediately. Travel the world, see Paris, visit Barcelona, live the life she has always dreamed of. Mabel asks Leonard to come with her, to start over together somewhere far away. Leonard gently refuses. She should not waste her youth caring for an old man carrying too many ghosts. Mabel says goodbye and disappears into the night. Alone now, Leonard begins packing his belongings. He methodically pours flammable liquid throughout the shop, preparing to burn every trace of evidence, every connection to this violent chapter of his life. Before he can light the match, Francis, somehow still clinging to life, raises a knife and lunges at Leonard. His first strike misses, only grazing Leonard's arm. As they struggle, Leonard finally reveals his true past. He admits he was not always a peaceful tailor. Once, long ago, Leonard worked as an enforcer for a criminal organization in Europe. He rolled up his sleeve to show Francis the faded tattoos covering his arms, permanent marks from that violent life. Leonard explains that one day, his boss ordered him to commit an act so terrible he could not bring himself to follow through. He fled, relocated to London, and tried to build a normal existence. He fell in love, married, had a daughter, and learned the craft of cutting and tailoring. For years, he believed he had escaped his past. Then his former associates found him. They burned his shop with his wife and daughter trapped inside as punishment for his betrayal. Shattered by grief, Leonard moved to Chicago, hoping to start over completely. On his very first day opening the new shop, fate brought Roy Boyle through his door. Leonard realized then that violence would always find him, no matter how far he ran or how carefully he hid. Francis makes one final attempt to stab Leonard. Leonard moves aside with surprising agility and drives his heavy cutting shears through Francis's throat. Francis dies instantly. Leonard withdraws the blades, wipes them clean, and sets them aside. He finishes dousing the shop in accelerant, strikes a match, and watches flames begin consuming his workshop, his tools, his carefully constructed new identity. Leonard walks out into the cold Chicago night as fire engulfs everything behind him. He carries a small bag containing a few possessions and multiple false passports. Each document shows a different name, a different identity, a different potential future. Leonard has been many people over the years. Now it is time to become someone new once again. He disappears into the darkness, leaving nothing behind but smoke and ash, ready to begin building yet another life in yet another city where perhaps, this time, peace might finally be possible.